Welcome to Shoulda Known. I am Venomous, and with me, as always, is my hetero life mates.
Titan.
On today's episode, we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look of working in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, so both of us have experience working as servers and bussers and hosts and various different things at the restaurant. And so we're going to give you our take on that experience, the pros, the cons, and then kind of how it affected us later on even, and the things that even today it affects on when we go out to eat, how we treat people.
We'd love to interact with you, so please like, subscribe, and leave a comment on this video. You don't want to miss this really interesting conversation. I had a lot of fun having this conversation with Titan today.
As always. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've worked at a restaurant. And I don't remember, I remember part of what you did. I don't remember if you ended up waiting tables or not, but in the end, you're still around it. But I kind of did. I waited tables. I was also the host and the busboy. I never really worked in the kitchen, at least at a restaurant. I did fast food, but not in a restaurant setting. And it was a different experience from what I see at most restaurants today, because it was a mom and pop kind of owned place, but it was a nice place. We didn't have like sections. Like it was basically the whole floor, and it was just a rotation of what table came next. They tried to get the even number of seats or equal number of seats, I guess, spread out amongst the different servers. Yeah. And so you're, on a Friday night, you'd have 10 tables at one time, and you're walking back and forth across the entire restaurant to get to them. Yeah, it was a lot. So that was kind of the experience that I had with that restaurant.
So what made you get into working in restaurants in the first place?
Money. So it was after we graduated, I think. And I wanted to wait tables because I'd heard there was more money to be made in that than where I was working, which was at an arcade kind of.
Oh yeah.
Not a Chuck E. Cheese. It was a laser tag place, but they did the parties and games and stuff, right? And so I was like, let's see if I can wait tables. But I wasn't quite 18 yet. So in that, in Virginia, you couldn't wait tables if they served alcohol. So I worked as the busboy instead, initially for a few months until I turned 18, and then I waited tables. So money for me.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm familiar with kind of what you did at the restaurant, but like, why did you get into it? And obviously money, because you didn't do it for fun. But what all did you do at the restaurant?
So I was a host, and then I also waited tables. So I did not at the restaurant that I'm going to avoid saying restaurant names because, I don't want to badmouth anyone. But so I worked at the place in Reston.
Mm-hmm.
I worked there as a host, and then I worked at a restaurant at the mall in Fairfax.
Okay, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. So, and there I worked as a server.
Okay.
Yeah, but the reason I got into it, so I remember being in high school, and there's only so many different types of jobs that you qualify for, like with only a high school education, like no one's gonna hire you to do anything that's really truly meaningful. So I knew people like yourself and some other folks, because you started working before I did, and I knew other folks that were working in restaurants, and I had one friend who was working at a restaurant that was popular to work at the time. And because I knew many people that used to work there at one point or another, and she was like, "Hey, we've got some openings for servers. Why don't you come and apply?" So it was, basically on a whim, right? So I went with her to the restaurant, and I applied. The general manager happened to be there, so she interviewed me on the spot, and she hired me on the spot. And that's how I started. But my job was a little. It wasn't the traditional hosting gig. So there's additional duties that you could take on in that restaurant. One of them was being responsible, basically being a barista. So it was an Italian chain restaurant, and they have people that specialize in making coffee. I was one of those people. And then they also have singers that go around and sing to tables. So I was one of those people too. So I got hired for that. My job interview was basically an audition. Yeah. So that's how I started, man. Just, everybody just that I knew, that was working, they were working in restaurants. And I knew I didn't necessarily want to do fast food.
Right.
But the idea of working, at a sit down restaurant to me was really appealing. So that's how I started.
Yeah. My first job was actually at fast food, chain not to be named.
Yeah.
And it was okay. I left because I moved to Virginia. And then my next job was at, and I will name it was Chuck E. Cheese. That was my next one. And that was, I'll just say, a fun experience. It wasn't, I don't know, it was okay. It was just a lot, and it didn't pay as well. And I was working with kids who went to the other high school. So, wasn't anybody I knew working there. And that's when I left and went to the other arcade place, which I'm sure is closed by now, which was Planet Play, because that was like a small chain there in that area. But all the kids from my high school worked there. And so I ended up going there and eventually to the actual sit-down restaurant just because I wanted to get into serving, because the hourly pay is garbage, as anybody who's waited tables knows. It's still garbage today.
So because they basically can you expand on that?
Taxes.
Yeah, can you expand on that? Because I don't think people have a whole lot of awareness. People love complaining about tipping culture, and they love complaining about tipping their servers, but there's a reason for that, at least when it comes to your wait staff. So talk about that a little bit more. How much were they paying you when you were a server back like 20 years ago?
Yeah. So, first I'll give a little bit of history. So the tipping and the way servers are paid actually stemmed from after the Civil War. It was a way to basically not pay the wait staff. And it became a thing so that they could keep people on, and the owners of the restaurants didn't have to actually pay their employees. So what happened 20 years ago is that my hourly pay was $2.35 an hour, I believe.
Whoa, that's huge.
And yeah, it was a ton. And basically that was just to cover my taxes on my tips. I averaged about 18%, which at that time wasn't bad because a lot of people were still tipping 15% as the normal standard.
Yeah.
But I was averaging about 18%. And pretty much every paycheck I got just said $0.
Right. Yeah.
Because all of it went straight to paying taxes. So I didn't get a check from the employer. It was all just based on your tips, which I was working. It was a weird schedule too, because you had to work, like, let's say you started lunch. So you get in at like 10:30 and prep for lunch, and you'd work until 2. Then you'd leave, unless you were the person in the bridge between lunch and dinner. You would leave and then come back at like 4, and then work until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, depending on the day. And so in the end, you really were putting in like 10 hours a day, because a lot of times I couldn't leave. I didn't have a car. I rode a bike to work. So I'd sit there, read a book for a couple hours till it's time to come back on shift. But I didn't get paid for any of that. So if you had a slow night where nobody was coming in, you made, less than minimum wage.
Right, yeah.
At that time. So, but yes, that's it in a nutshell. And it's still today, I think it's $3 and change now, I think, which is still way below standard minimum wage.
Yeah. So when I was waiting tables, it was $2.13 an hour. So you, man,
that's what it was. $2.13.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say
$2.13 as well. Okay. I just couldn't remember.
Yeah. And I think it still is. I think it's still $2.13 an hour. Well, we'll have to fact check that later. But yeah, man, I think you highlighted something super important that most people don't know. And that is that the wait staff does not really make a whole lot of money from the restaurant directly. They or from their employer.
Right.
Did you have benefits or anything like that? Like what did you have anything?
Oh God, no.
No, right?
No.
And I would probably say that that most people who are in the service industry, unless they move into a managerial role, they don't get any benefits.
Right.
And the chances are they're not going to get all the hours that they need to get those benefits.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's like mine. Like I said, I would be there. I'd work 5-6 days a week, usually 6 days a week.
Yeah.
But because of the way they would have you clock out and then clock back in, because I could leave, I just didn't have a means to leave. And then what I was going to do, if I could, I would just drive home for an hour and a half,
and then come back. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And so anyways, it sucks.
So what's like?
It sucks for everybody.
So on average, so you said on average you made about 18% in tips. Why dollar wise? What was that like?
So let's say at lunch I would average about $30 to $40. We're in there for lunch. Like 40 was a pretty good day. 30 was about average because it's lunch.
Yeah.
Back then, the average lunch plate was like $7-8 at max. When you get two people usually come in, even if you did 20% on that, it's not a lot. So I would make and it wasn't, we were pretty busy because we had a lot of regulars, but it wasn't crazy busy. Plus there was like 5 servers. So yeah, it was like $30 on average. On a night shift, non-Friday, Saturday, so Wednesday, let's say, again, 30, maybe $50 if you're lucky, because we just had way less people on those midweek kind of days. Friday night, I probably make 100, 130 on average.
Yeah, and you're feeling good about that.
But you're also...
Yeah, and
you were feeling good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're probably the first person cut,
right?
Because you're working... At that point, were you working a double, or was that just on a Friday evening?
That was just Friday evening.
Just Friday evening. That's really good.
That was just Friday evening.
That's really good, dude. That's really
good. Well, and that's like I said, you'd have 10 tables at a given time. And it was, the restaurant wasn't, it wasn't very expensive, but they did have some higher dollar steaks and things like that. So it would get a little pricier, especially if people were drinking or get desserts and stuff like that. I mean, I think the average bill for people, a party of 2 the dinner was probably $40 on average. So, that's $8 if you're doing good, which like I said, I usually was. So, but yeah, in the end, when you add it all up, it really wasn't a ton of money. I was luckily living at home still and all that. So what about for you? What was your experience as far as your pay?
Yeah, it really wasn't great. Like during the holidays, I made a good deal of dough, if I remember correctly. But the most I ever really made working all day was probably like $150 or something like that. I remember working a double one time, and I went home, with about $150, if I remember correctly, or something like that. And I was like stoked. I'm like, damn, dude, this is great. It's a good deal of money, right? I worked all day. Right. Now, fast forward 20 odd something years, and bro, like I don't get out of bed for that amount of money. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's
definitely different.
Yeah.
That was one thing that was nice about the place I worked, is that we would host whether it's parties or like wedding receptions and stuff like that there. And man, that's where you'd make some money, because you'd work, 2-3 hours and you'd, pocket $150 easy. So that's $50 an hour. That sounds great. The problem was all the other times you worked where you only made,
you don't make any money,
or $4 or $5 an hour.
Yeah.
So it's like on average, everything's okay, but still not great. The places that were really great to work, were the really high end restaurants, because you'd only need 3 or 4 tables a night. You'd clear $200-300, but they were also a lot more strict in how you did the service and stuff. So
So let me ask you this.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of respect for them. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Were there any Gordon Ramsay moments when you worked at a restaurant?
So it never had a problem with the chef. I did have a manager I had issues with. I had two kind of. So one manager used to mess with me. Like he'd come up as I'm like putting in the order in the machine in the computer, and he'd like hit me in the kidneys. No friggin' reason.
What?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And I didn't realize how big I was. Like I just didn't get it. Like to me, I didn't feel that big. So twice I had to teach him a lesson. One time he messed with me, and I grabbed him and put him in a guillotine choke.
Whoa.
And so that was he stopped messing with me for a little while then, because the kitchen staff started, because they called him Jefe, which is boss, but also because his name was Jeff. But they said that he was like, Titan made, Jefe his bitch kind of a thing. So he stopped messing with me for a little while. But then one day, it was like 2 minutes to close. It was like a Friday night or something like that. It was like 2 minutes. And this couple walked in, and all he had to tell them was like, listen, guys, the kitchen's already closed up. We've been kind of dead all day or whatever. And no, he sat them anyways. And I'd worked a double. I was tired. And I was like, dude, you
were ready to go home.
Just let them, ready to go home. And he goes, just go ahead and serve them, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay. And of course they wanted appetizers. No, they wanted drinks. And then when I came back with their drinks, they said, you guys ready to order? Do you want an appetizer or whatever? They were like, no, we're just going to sit for a little bit first. And then we'll order something.
They were just
mother
camping.
of God. So, and those are the people that have never waited tables, so they don't understand how that works. Like if I'm, we're out, it's time, we go to a restaurant and they close in 10 minutes, I won't go in. We'll go somewhere else because I don't want to do that to somebody. Now, in this instance, I'm on the wrong a little bit, because as I go back and I'm telling, I'm bitching and whining, he starts giving me shit and making fun. And I lost my temper, and I basically body checked him into the wall.
Damn.
Yeah, he never messed with me after that. But again, I was a little wrong. That was my temper getting the best of me. Another story was this other manager, and she was like the adopted daughter for the owners. Like she could do no wrong. And she started out as a server as well. And they had made her a manager. And so I had this family. It was a large table. It was like 8 or 10 people. And they put in their order. And there was a little kid, like a 2-year-old. You always bring out the kid's food first. You never bring out the parents' food, right? And the parents' food was ready. And there was like, I think that some reason it was behind. It was taking forever, whatever, doesn't matter. And I was like, no, give me the kids. I think it was like a grilled cheese or chicken tenders. There's
something
no reason
super
for it
easy.
not to
Doesn't
be
take
ready.
very long to cook. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I flat out refused. I said, no, I am not taking that to that table without that kid's food. They can wait 2 more minutes. And she's like, but they've already been waiting. I'm like, doesn't matter. And basically she ended up just, she was like, well, you're going to do it or else you're fired. And I was like, I don't give a crap. Like I'd already joined the military. I was just waiting for my day. I was like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And we ended up having a sit down talk later with the owners. And what was funny is the other servers were like, yeah, you were definitely right. You should never, she shouldn't have done that. But of course the owners took her side.
Yeah, I agree.
And they didn't fire me. They still kept me around. So,
no, yeah, of course. I mean,
but yeah, so that was the only 2 times. I never had the chef like yelling and screaming. He was actually a really chill guy.
Yeah.
His biggest complaint would be people who ordered filet mignon, but then would order it well done. So he would yell about that. He's
Man,
like,
talk about ruining the meat.
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't remember ever getting yelled at by any of the cooks or anything, but I do remember hearing other people getting yelled at for sure, dude. Like,
oh yeah,
100%, yeah. So when I worked at the unnamed restaurant in Reston, that didn't really happen a whole lot because the layout of that particular restaurant is one where the kitchen is completely open. Yeah. So you really couldn't get away with something like that there. However, the restaurant at the mall, like the kitchen was not open, and you would hear all the messed up things people would say back there. And it was rough. Like I steered clear of the back of the house whenever I could. Like I just could not. I just didn't want to be what is it? I didn't want to be caught in somebody's sights back there. But
it was like the movie Waiting.
Kinda, except not quite. That? Yeah, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, dude. That movie is it's so good. It's good because a lot of the time, it's in some cases, some of the scenarios in that movie are real. Like these are real things that waiters have to go through. In other cases, it's like a fantasy. It's things that the wait staff is thinking, but they're not really doing anything about it because they can't. So yeah, that movie, total classic. But yeah, man, I remember seeing like just people getting dressed down and stuff like that by the kitchen staff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was definitely a thing. So there were definitely some Gordon Ramsay moments that I witnessed. But like, so here's the thing. So working in a restaurant is not like working at a professional office. You got folks that are in various stages of their professional career. Oftentimes, those folks are in the very early stages of their professional career. And you see all sorts of weird stuff, man. Like you see people like managers like dating super young women that work for them, right? Like you see all sorts of weird stuff. People like going out and partying together. People that like really live. So being a server sometimes could feel like a lifestyle, right? Like because you know each other and everyone like wants to people want to hang out usually, and there's some sort of party and you hear about people's drama, and it's just it can be kind of wild sometimes. And I don't think restaurants do, or at least back then, they didn't do a good job at training their managers. I don't think they did a good job at even training the wait staff. As long as you didn't piss customers off and you knew the menu, boom, like that's all they cared about, right? Like that's it.
Yep.
So they don't really put an emphasis on like workplace harassment and some of that other stuff that other environments probably do.
So what about customers? You got any crazy stories dealing with a customer?
So I don't know. I not necessarily crazy. There was a guy that used to be a regular at the restaurant at the mall, and he was a drunk. Every night he would be at the restaurant, same time. He would hang out there all night long by himself. I mean, we would chat with him and we would interact with him. Excuse me one sec.
Sure. Yeah.
For whatever reason, like my ears like getting like clogged. Anyway, so yeah, so he would come in, we would interact with him and everything. And he seemed nice. I have no idea. I don't remember what his name was. I don't remember what he did for a living. I don't think anybody really knew. But one day I ended up having to drive him home. So because he was so drunk, like so we had to drive him home. So I think it was me and somebody else who drove him home, and it was fine, right? Like it was just super, like nothing bad happened or anything like that. I'm glad that we did it. I don't know if that's something a restaurant would do today, when you can like easily call an Uber and have somebody pick you up super easily, or call a cab, right? But that's what we did, right? Yeah. This guy came in every day. We knew him. And we wanted him to be okay, so instead of letting him drive home, we took him home ourselves. So he was just a guy that just was a character, and I just remember really, really vividly. There was another time, working during the holidays brings out different emotions for different people. Just because you're working the winter holiday time doesn't mean that everybody is happy. Just because it's Valentine's Day doesn't mean that everybody's happy. So you'll come into and you'll work a table. You'll have somebody there that is just not. That they're not in a good place mentally, and sometimes they take that out on you. There was this one lady one time who came in. I think it was Valentine's Day. And she just, she came in, she had an attitude, you know what I mean? She had like a chip on her shoulder and everything. She sat down.
Right.
And, I waited on her and the interactions were fine, right? Like she didn't curse. She didn't like, do anything out of line. But as her waiter, it was, it's a little awkward because you don't know what's going to set this customer off. So you're walking on eggshells the entire time that you're waiting on this person. And so she finished her meal and everything. I think she even came with a book, and she was just hanging out. And she went to pay for her food and everything, and she's like, you've been so good to me today. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you. It's like, boom, right? Like, she was having a bad day, clearly.
Yeah.
And I didn't feed into her emotion. I just went along, did my job, made sure that she was okay. She gave me a really great tip, and that was it, right? So that's another, cool customer story that I felt was I felt very satisfied, after that interaction.
Right.
And then the third is the reason that I left. So the third story that I have is this guy and this woman came in. I think they were married or whatever. And he was just a complete a-hole. So the restaurant that I was working at, they had breadsticks that people would bring out.
Yeah.
We wouldn't always bring out breadsticks for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes you would kind of forget because you're busy. Sometimes, like, there wouldn't be any breadsticks that are available.
Mm-hmm.
So you just serve the table, take their order and whatnot. And this guy was so bent out of shape that I didn't bring out his breadsticks. And he was verbally abusive. And I offered him, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to have a manager come talk to you, blah, blah, blah. My apologies. And he was just like, hey, I don't want to talk to your effing manager. Like, you're an F up, blah, blah, blah. And he just, and his wife looked, partner, wife, whatever, she looked horrified. But never once did she stand up and say something. You know what I mean? Like, never once was she like, dude, like, back off the server.
Probably because he cheats her like that at home.
Probably, exactly. So you never know, right? Who's going to come into your section and who you're going to have to wait on. This guy was just a total dick. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not, like we were talking about earlier, I wasn't making a ton of money. $100 was not worth the verbal abuse I was getting from this guy.
No.
So I just went to my manager and I said, hey man, I'm done. This guy's being a dick. Yeah. I'm not putting up with that. And I left. So that was my last day. That was my last table that I waited on.
I had a couple one time that came in, they'd ordered drinks, ordered appetizers, and there was a large party. This is probably around Christmas time, maybe. I don't remember, it was a long time ago, but there was a large corporate party there. And I told them, I said, hey, you probably want to go ahead and put your order in before that table. Like, or else you're going to be behind them. It's going to take forever. Oh, we're not in a rush. We're no worries, blah, 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 all this stuff. And sure enough, they didn't put their order in until after that table.
Of course.
And then it was like 40 minutes later. But I'd warned them because it was like that party was like 50 people.
Wow. And
they were doing a sit down menu. They were just wish I'd had that table. But anyways, so then and I mean, they didn't eat just one appetizer. They'd already spent probably $50 between drinks and appetizers before their meal. And so I kept telling them, like, I'm sorry that's taking so long. I said, but this. And so I'm walking out with their food in my hands and they're walking out the front door. And I was like, where are you guys going? They're like, oh, well, we just figured, I was like, so you're not going to pay for the food that you ate? And now luckily I don't think I ever had anybody actually dine and dash on me. But I know people who had it happen to them, and the owners never held them accountable for it. So that was good. Some places do, which is even more messed up.
Yeah.
And they're like, and I called them out on it. They're like, well, we're not doing that. Like, we would never do that. I'm like, you're literally walking doing it right out the front door.
Caught you red-handed.
How in the world? Yeah. And they're like, well, we're so offended. We want to speak to your manager. And I was like, no problem. So I tell the manager what's going on, and he comes out, and of course he comps their meal, gives them their food to go, and I get no tip on it. And in the end, I think it was probably $100 worth of food, all in all, and drinks. So, you're looking at, what should have been $20 coming to my pocket on average, 18 to 20. And then the worst thing is I got to tip the bar out at the end of everything. So that's something I think, people don't realize, is that you're tipping the server. The server then has to pull their, depending on the place. Some places they pull things together, some places don't. But you as the server have to tip out the bartender for making drinks. Yep. You also have to tip out the bus and bussers and anybody else, hosts for seating you. Like, there's this whole thing. Like, even though you may make $100, you don't get that $100. Nope. You may only get 80 by the time it's done, especially if you get a lot of alcohol or whatever from the bar. And so, but that was one experience that it just that just like pissed me off. And I had, and then I can't remember the other bad experience, but it was a good experience. We had this one guy who come in. He was a former Navy SEAL. He would come in, bring his company in, like 6 or 7, 8 people, whatever, for lunch usually, and they would just order a ton of appetizers, no alcohol, but their bill would still be $200 to $300 easy. He would tip us $100.
That's amazing.
Like, that was the tip.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was awesome. Mm-hmm. So whoever was the host would usually rotate them through people. They were like, "Oh, you got in last time, so you don't get him this time," because we all knew he was going to tip $100. But that was not the norm. He always took care of us. Of course, I mean, we did everything for this guy to give him good service. Of course.
You remember people like that.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I told him I was joining the Navy, he's like, "Well, where are you going?" He said, "You going to Orlando for boot camp?" And I'm like, "No." I said, "They already closed it." I said, "I'm going to Chicago." And it was going to be January when I went to Chicago. And he's like, "This is an ex-Navy SEAL," going, "Yeah, I feel sorry for you." And he tipped me like $200 that day.
Damn, that's amazing.
It was just for going. So yeah, that was awesome. But, and and it's funny too, because I think those experiences one other thing that I would do, and I'm sure your restaurants did too. We had a policy: parties over 6, automatic. At that time, I think 15%.
Yeah.
I think it was 15%.
That's usually that's pretty. That's a pretty universal policy. 15 or 20.
Now I think it's 18%.
Yeah, something like that varies.
I think
by
now
restaurant.
it's 18 or something like that. But I would never. So if I knew I did a good job, I would not put the tip on at all. Like, I wouldn't. I'd let it just come naturally, because a lot of people would see that and go, "Oh, well, I don't need to tip anything extra." But if I did a bad job, I would throw the tip on.
Yeah.
And I had one guy complain about it because he's like, "Well, the service was awful," and blah, which it was. It was my fault. I screwed up. But and I was like, "Sir, it says it right there. It's on the menu, like on every page. Yep. Parties over 6, and there was 10 of them." And he complained to the manager, and the manager's like, "Well, you should have said something earlier. We could have done something." He's like, "But that is our policy." So, so for me now, when I go, and like we just actually went out few weeks ago, and there's a large party of us, I always check, was the tip added? Now, that doesn't mean I don't add more. This person, they had done a phenomenal job, so they had already added the 18%, and I'm like, no, they deserve more. So I think
we do the same thing too.
I end up tipping them like 25% total with everything.
Yeah, we do the same thing. Yeah,
and that's where I'll be generous, because I've done it. I know what it takes to do this, and it's a very thankless job in a lot of ways. But I'm also the other way too. If you're giving me crappy service, now I'll never not tip, because people just think maybe you forgot. But I have tipped $1 one time. And it sounds like a jerk move, but this person, while it was a large party of us, there was 10 of us. We were their only table. So they had no other table but us. We had to go to the bar ourselves to get our drinks, because she disappeared and wouldn't come back. I don't know where she was. So we started going to the bar to get our own drinks. They didn't bring my food until all of the people I was there with had eaten.
Oh, wow.
Like, they all got their food and had eaten
Jesus. By
the time I got my food. And it was just like this whole thing. And then in the end, I was like, and we talked to the manager, and I was like, and that's when we found out we were the only table. He's like, "Well, she hasn't had a large table in a long time." Like, it's only 10 of us, and it's the only table. Like, how it, and I know it's not an easy job per se, but it's not that hard either. Get us our drinks, get us our food. That's all you got to do. Write that crap down if you can. Some restaurants don't allow it. This one did. but yeah, I tipped her $1. But typically I start at 20% and I'll go up if service is good. I'll go down within usually reason if service just wasn't great. But I usually still tip like 18%, even if service wasn't great. But that's just
same.
I do things.
So, so I don't know if you've heard this before, or if this is true or not. I don't know if I'm just making it up or not. If you get audited as a server, aren't they looking for like 15 to 20% of the revenue that you closed to tax you on?
So I don't know about now, but I know back in when I did it, because I asked the question and they said they only reported 8%. So it was 8% of the revenue is what they reported to the IRS. Luckily, that's 20 years ago and statute of limitations, so I'm good. But it wouldn't be that much money anyways. It wasn't my fault. I was 18. That's the restaurant's doing, I guess. But so for what I understand now, yes, they do report more. And it is based on that total revenue. So yeah, if you got audited, you'd have to go back to the company and say, how much did I as a server do?
Yeah, but hold on one sec. So when you worked at the restaurant, you didn't report, or it wasn't on you to report like your tips? Because we had to report our tips.
Correct. It was on the
the restaurant?
I had to report.
Really?
It was on the restaurant to report as far as what the potential income I had, because a lot of it was cash.
Got it.
Back then.
That makes sense. Yep.
Nowadays, it's almost all credit cards, so it's a lot easier for them to track.
Right.
But back then, it was almost, I'd say, at least 50 to 60% cash. Easy. But yeah, it was, the restaurant did all the reporting as far as that. That's the reason I had no money in my paycheck, because they already took it out to pay my taxes based on that. I think it was 8% or maybe 12%. I don't remember exactly. Yeah. So, and because I was 18 and still didn't make that much money, I got most of it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the tax brackets.
Right.
Anyways. Yeah, I was going to say, one thing today that I think personally, I hate our tip culture. One, while yes, you technically pay for every employee at any place that you are a customer, whether you're buying something from someplace or whatever. I mean, it's built into their overhead, but it's up to the employer to pay them, right, a fair wage. With especially servers and even bartenders. Bartenders usually make a little bit more per hour, but still way underpaid. It's not like that in most of the rest of the world. You go to pretty much every restaurant in Europe, and there is a service fee for you to eat at that restaurant. And it's not a ton. It's like €5 or whatever. And everybody pays that to sit down at the restaurant. It's €5. That covers the cost of that employee to wait tables. You don't tip anything.
We need to do that here.
You can tip.
Yeah, we need to do that here.
You can tip.
It's crazy.
If you do a great job, but you only tip like €1 or €2. You don't tip 20 or 10 or whatever. It's 1 or 2. That's it. And people are always like, oh, but the cost of everything would go up so high. No, it wouldn't. Maybe an extra $1 or $2 on the cost of your food, especially if you did a service charge, just a flat fee, $5 for every table. Like it would basically cover it. So there wouldn't be this increase in cost. And in the end, it would be cheaper for you as the consumer because you're not paying, basically that person's wage.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree. The restaurant industry here basically takes the burden of the employee costs. They take that burden, place it directly on the customer instead of them accepting that burden themselves directly, which to me is really scummy. Yeah. It's really scummy. And
it is.
And like we've talked about, the job is not, it's got its ups and downs. It's got its benefits, right? It's nice walking home and having a bunch of cash. But like we've just said, like you're not making hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day waiting tables. You might make a couple of hundred. And that's on a good day. Most of the time, you're probably going to make under $100 that shift or that day. And to me, it's kind of just crap that the restaurant industry here takes advantage of this population that is working really hard for them, and And I don't think so. Some people believe that if you remove tipping from serving, that service is going to go down. Now, you've actually traveled to Europe.
Yeah.
What have you personally experienced? Have you experienced that service is bad because there's no tipping there?
So I will say in France, in Paris especially, because actually even in the small town I was in France, service was it was great actually.
Okay.
Like I remember the place we stopped for lunch in Paris, the guy was phenomenal. He went above and beyond. And I did end up tipping him a couple extra euro because he was so good. Italy was a little bit slower, but that's kind of just how it's a cultural thing. They're just dinner is more of an event type thing. It's not just a rush in and rush out. It's take your time, sit and eat and enjoy. So they're not in a huge rush. And actually, I think I talked about this in our travel thing. I yelled at a lady because she was so rude to the waiter, and she was an American. And I yelled at her about it. And I was like, this isn't the Olive Garden. This is actually Italy. This is where this stuff is from. This is where it's made. This is how they do it. If you don't like it, don't come here.
Right. Yeah.
And the worst place for service was Poland. And not everywhere, but especially the smaller town when we visited one of the smaller towns. And there again, it's cultural. It wasn't that the service was bad. It's the way they serve is that you do not get waited on until the table before you has their food.
Really?
So
interesting.
Yeah. So
wow.
3 tables show up 2 minutes before you and get seated. You don't even get your drinks until the table, like they don't even come talk to you until the table before you has their food. That's just the way some of those places did. Like I remember we went to lunch when we first got there, and it was an hour and a half to eat lunch.
Wow.
Like it took 45 minutes, or no, it took almost an hour before we got our food. And again, that's just their culture.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that the quality of service itself went down, because once you got their attention, or once it was your return, the service was great. They were basically beck and call because they only waited on you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I disagree with that concept of, oh, well, if we stop tipping, they're not going to do a good job. I mean, honestly, we tip everybody. If you get a tattoo, you're supposed to tip. You get a haircut, you tip. If you take a cab ride or something like that, you tip. Like we tip everybody. I mean, when are we going to start tipping our doctors?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty ridiculous.
And like I said before in the beginning, the service culture as it stands in the United States is based on post-Civil War slavery, basically. It was a way to keep people from not getting paid well. Free labor, because that's what it is to the company, really.
It is.
$2.13 an hour is free labor.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I agree.
I actually made more money as a busboy most days, especially at lunch.
Yeah, because you actually
because I made $5 an hour.
Yep.
Minimum wage.
Yeah. So
plus,
when
I got tipped out from all the servers and the bartender.
See, that's awesome. So when I was a host, because I also did like the entertainment and I also did the coffee,
right,
I got paid an extra couple of dollars. So that was my first job. So I was making like $8 an hour being a host.
Yeah.
And and that was really good at the time. So
oh yeah, back then definitely for an 18-year-old kid, $1 an hour, because
$1 an hour, baby.
Minimum wage was only $4.75, I think.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was around that.
Maybe $5.15.
Yeah,
it may have gone up to $5.15 by that point. Because I remember my first job, it was $4.25 an hour. So,
yeah.
Which hell, even if you compare it to minimum wage today, at most places like the state I'm in, that was still more money per hour than they get paid per hour with inflation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, would you ever go back to waiting tables again?
If I really, really, really had to.
Yeah.
Like if I had no alternative and the alternative was to be homeless, then yes. I'll do pretty much anything to not do that.
Right. Yeah. Same. So I feel the same way.
I'll get
I wouldn't seek it out as a first option.
Page.
Yeah, I wouldn't seek it out as a first option or a second option or a third option. But eventually I could probably get there.
Yeah.
So one of the things I don't know about you, but one of the things that waiting tables did for me is you get exposed to a lot of people, okay, and
Oh yeah.
you pick up on patterns of people. So I could look at it. It made me a little judgy. I will say this. I will say it made me a little judgy because I would look at somebody that would come in at the host stand, and I had a general idea of what my serving experience was going to be like for that party. I had a pretty good idea of whether or not they were going to run me around. And running around means like you ask for, or you take their order, or you take their drinks, right? And then everyone then you bring the drink order back, and then they want something else, and then they want something else, and then they want something else, they want something else. So I always knew by looking at somebody like, hey, okay, this person's probably going to be high maintenance. Sometimes with families, I could look at certain families and be like, oh man, my section is going to be demolished. It's going to be demolished by this family. Because sometimes, like, you could look at some people and you can tell, like, okay, are they controlling their kids? Are they not controlling their kids, right? Like, you can make those observations before they even sit down, so you have an idea of what your experience is going to be like serving them. So, yeah, it made me kind of jaded in that way, you know? But, yeah. Like, I could even get down to the,
I'll tell you,
to the sorts of orders that they would put in. Like, I knew some certain people were going to get food they were going to get chicken, and if they're going to get steak, it was going to be well done, right? Like, I just, after seeing it over and over and over again, you see these patterns with different people, and you just, like, boom, like, you just become super, super judgy. But anyway, so that's one of the things. Them. So that's one of the things that, like, waiting tables did for me.
Well, I'll tell you, honestly, one of the things for me is that to this day, I hate Cheerios. Because people would bring their kids in with Cheerios. Yeah. People would bring their kids in with the Cheerios. And they're all over the floor, and they're wet and gross. And just, like, I don't care. I can't. Honey Nut Cheerios, I don't know if I bought a box since. Or ever. Just partially because of that, because it's gross. And it's funny because my ex, she was the same way, because she had waited tables too, and she absolutely hated when my son was little. We refused to buy the Cheerios and do that whole thing. We bought these other little snacks that they had for kids at that time, just because we just hated them because of everybody bringing. That was the go-to snack for small toddlers.
Yep. Cheerios. That's funny, man.
And they'd be all over the floor.
What a mess. They get everywhere.
Anyways. Yeah. I gotta sit up. My back's hurting.
Oh, man. We don't want that. All right, cool. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to cover? Anything else top of mind around waiting tables?
No, that's not. I mean, it's a thankless job. I guess my closing on it is it's a thankless job in so many ways. But I'm also, because I've done it, I'm also very quick to judge how poorly somebody's doing on it. And I mentioned it before, you go into a lot, especially chain restaurants, and they have these sections where they've only got 4 tables, and I can't get decent service, and you've only got 4 tables. Like, that's when I'm like, okay, you just don't do a good job. There's no reason for you not to come and refill my drink during that time. So I think that's one thing, is it's definitely made me jaded when I get poor service because of it. But I can also recognize when people are going above and beyond, when I'm the person making them be that, running all over the place, because it's like, oh crap, can you actually get me hot sauce too? And and I try to tell them all up front. I try to, but even then, sometimes they forget, and that's okay. And, it's not a big deal. I'm just like, okay, well, now that you forgot, you got to go get it. But I recognize when they do that, or I recognize if I'm drinking a ton of, whatever my drink is, and they're constantly getting me refills, I recognize that, and then I give them extra for that, because it is above and beyond. But I actually, one other thing, I want to throw it in there, because it actually, I read an article about it, and it kind of pisses me off every time I see it. Why are we tipping at places like Chipotle? I just bring up that chain as an example, but there's so
Yeah.
many others. You did nothing for me that the person at McDonald's would do. So why am I tipping you? The reason we tip servers is because they actually come to take your order, bring you your drink, bring you your food, whatever you need, right? That's serving you. I tell you what to make, you're making it. Why do I tip? And I've actually read this thing that said that they do it because most people will tip because they feel guilty because you're paying for it and they're right there. But in this article, it said you have no reason to tip these people in those types of establishments.
Yeah, I don't.
Like, honestly, I tip Starbucks. But why am I tipping? I mean, I know they should get tipped because they're probably not getting paid enough. But again, that's not my fault. That's the company's fault. Because you and I both know that Frappuccino does not cost them $7 to make, from a cost and overhead perspective. So the company is reaping all these benefits. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's something that there was a movie years ago, Reservoir Dogs, where they have this large argument over tipping.
Yep.
And Steve Buscemi's character's like, I don't tip. Yeah, exactly. Funny scene. Anybody wants to go see it? I disagree with him. I will tip servers.
Yep.
But why are we tipping these other places when they did nothing different than a fast food restaurant?
Yep. And they're making at least minimum wage.
And they're making at least, if not more, than minimum wage.
More often than not, they're going to be making more.
Most,
more often than not, they're probably going to be making more than minimum wage. So, like, why are we tipping those people?
Right.
So So I'll say this:
pay your people a fair wage.
So I'll say this: so I am appreciative of my experience at restaurants because it taught me about customer service. It taught me about waiting tables is a little bit of a team-oriented sort of a job when done right. It usually is, right? Because like you said earlier, you're tipping the bartender, you're tipping the busser, and so it really is a team sport. And I've seen some really good managers working at restaurants, some bad managers. I've seen more bad than the good ones. But the good ones to me were like highly influential, and they've made me into who I am today and how I approach teams, right? And interfacing with other people. So to me, like from that perspective, it was good. I'm glad that I do it. Would I do it again? Like I said earlier, it would not be my first, my second, third, or fourth choice, but if I had to for some quick cash, I absolutely would. I think, if you're younger in your career and you don't have a whole lot of exposure, I think it's a great starting point for you. And some people that I worked with made it their careers. They would go into management, make a decent living doing that. I knew people that were servers their entire career. This one lady that I worked with at the restaurant at the mall, like she was amazing server, and I learned so much from her, and she made a good living waiting tables, and some people can do that. And so if you're considering it for a job, just know that there are some downsides, and we've talked a lot about the downsides today, but there's also some goodness there too. So I do recommend it if you're starting out. If you want to do something else beyond waiting tables, obviously, to me, waiting tables was a means to an end. Eventually, after that guy, that rude customer really got under my skin, I knew I was done, right? And I went off into a different. I took my career in a different direction, and I'm glad I did. If that guy had not come in and been as rude as he was, I probably would have been working at a restaurant longer. Who knows? I probably wouldn't have moved on. I probably would have gone into management in a restaurant. Who knows what my career would have been like in that alternate universe? But even having that negative interaction ended up being a positive thing for me. So that's it for today's episode. We'll be releasing these bi-weekly as video to YouTube and as an audio version on all podcasting platforms. So stick around, make sure that you subscribe, and check out the links in the description for more content. Thanks for dropping by, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.